Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants and Reach the World live event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If you've been tuning in the last few weeks, you know we've been exploring the Weddell Sea with Reach the World and the Falkland Maritime Heritage Trust, and it has been just an absolute blast. We've explored the Agulhas II and met so many of the incredible international expedition members who are working so well together in the search for Ernest Shackleton's endurance, from predicting the weather to recording media to archaeology, medicine, technology, and captaining the ship, even leading the expedition. There's so many people behind the scenes making this expedition possible. And of course, there's a ton of people back home rooting the expedition on who have all played a role in its journey so far. So today we're going to head back to the Weddell Sea, back on board the SA Agulhas II, and we're going to catch up with Reach the World's Tim Jacob. So let's bring him in now and let's see what he's been up to. Hey Tim, how you doing today?
Hey Joe, great to see you. Welcome everyone back aboard the SA Agulhas II. So great to have you all back on board the ship. It's another great day in the Weddell Sea. Been very, very busy around here for sure. For any of you who are paying close attention to the Endurance22.org website and the ship tracker, you'll know that we're heading north again out of the Weddell Sea. And as I look out the window right now, right behind me, we're just getting into one of the really unique features of the Weddell Sea, which is the Marginal Ice Zone, where the thick pack ice sort of becomes more pieces of ice and transitions into the open South Atlantic. I see some Adelie penguins down on one of the floes just off to my left. It's a great day out here. I am really excited to share with our young explorers, especially one of the really neat things that I got to do earlier this morning. And Joe, I think you have a video that we can show along with it. As we're planning our route out of the Weddell Sea, one of the things that was deemed useful by the captain and the people who are navigating the ship is that we did a reconnaissance flight of the ice leads ahead of the ship. So I got to fly in a Bell helicopter this morning about 30 nautical miles ahead of the ship and follow some of these ice leads in the ice. And you can see here one of the giant icebergs that we flew around that was just absolutely breathtaking. Look at that new ice around in the edge right around the iceberg, and then that big piece of the ice shelf that broke off long ago from the Antarctic continent has been sort of stuck in the ice pack for who knows how long. I'll bet our guest today might be able to give us an estimate. And just together, the whole sum of that experience, flying on a helicopter, landing on the moving ship when we came back as the ship was moving up this lead, this open stretch of water back towards the South Atlantic. Didn't stop for us as we came down the helicopter and touched down. It's just an incredible experience, captured, I think, pretty well by this video. So that was a fantastic experience. It feels a little bit surreal to be seeing so much more open water around us. We've been surrounded by snow and ice for the last several weeks in this sort of wintry, icy, snowy wonderland, even though it's really just the end of summer here in the Weddell Sea. But we know from the meteorologists on board the ship, of course, we're paying close attention to the weather and the temperature and some of the storm systems in the South Atlantic, that the weather patterns are starting to look a lot more wintry for the Weddell Sea. The overall ice growth in the Weddell Sea has expanded rapidly. As I've said before, when we first arrived in the Weddell Sea a couple weeks ago, we traveled about 10 nautical miles from the edge of the ice to the search area for Endurance. And now today, as we're moving away from that search area and back out towards the open ocean, we're traveling about 50 nautical miles to get back out to that open water. So this massive clump of sea ice, frozen sea ice in the Weddell Sea that spins in the Weddell Sea, what we call the gyre, is growing rapidly, and it's one of the signs that winter is coming. And I think we're getting out of the Weddell Sea just in time if it wasn't our intention to spend the whole winter here. So it feels good to be back on the move, and very, very excited to connect with you all from the ship today.
All right. That's awesome, Tim. That's a great video. So exciting to get to go up on that reconnaissance flight, get a real look at the ice. That big iceberg was amazing. And then landing on the moving ship, I imagine those are experiences you're not going to forget for a while.
Pretty great. And for those of you who are avid followers of Sealy and Sealy's adventure as part of this expedition, you'll be happy to know that Sealy came with me and had a great time.
All right, that's awesome. Well, if you do want to keep track of where Tim and the Agulhas 2 are, I'm going to share this link up here. You can keep track of the ship's movements. If you haven't before, you can see that they are on the move, and then keep a track and follow along, see where they are heading. Well, Tim, it looks like somebody may have joined you there on Monkey Island. Maybe I'll let you make some introductions, and then I've got some pictures here ready to share as well.
Fantastic, Joe. I'm so excited for today's event because the topic of today, sea ice, is something I have learned so much about over the last few weeks, and it's largely due to my special guest. Honestly, before I came to the Weddell Sea, I did not give much thought to sea ice. I didn't know anything about it, and coming here, it becomes sort of like a fascination because it changes every day. There's different kinds. And one of the people on board, actually the primary person on board who helped me appreciate the difference in the state of sea ice and why sea ice is so cool, it's not just frozen water, it's so much more than that, is Dr. Steffi Arndt. She is here with the Alfred Wegener Institute doing some really amazing research on sea ice, and just has this overwhelming passion for sea ice that I think you're going to really enjoy too. And she's sitting right here, right next to me. There's Steffi. I am going to let Steffi introduce herself and tell us a little bit about you and how you got so passionate about sea ice.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steffi. As already was mentioned, I'm a sea ice physicist from the Alfred Wegener Institute in Bremerhaven in Germany, and I'm just like super excited in exactly that moment because we are just about to cross the sea ice edge outside. So this is why I'm even more excited. So yeah, my area of research is the sea ice, and here especially the snow on top of the sea ice, because this makes a lot of with the sea ice, as it gives it its color, and it's a lot of it's really important for the energy and mass budget. So for all fluxes around the sea ice and how it's growing, and this is exactly also what was my topic here on board. How does sea ice form? What is the history of the snow and the ice on top and the ice below? When it's like drifting through the Weddell Sea. And yeah, this is what all my studies were here about. And just right now, as I said, we're crossing the ice edge, and this is now super exciting because we have not only now, we have seen for 4 weeks now, I think only white, and now it's getting a new color, it's blue again. And on the ice edge, you can see then a lot of those new ice formation stuff, because we are now here in Antarctica. As it's today in back home where you are all sitting now, it's getting like into spring, but here it's getting like into autumn and winter. And winter means here that the sea ice is forming, and we are just like now in this beginning stage of like thin sea ice, like gray ice and nihilus and pancakes. And this is just what I'm now super excited about, because this is just like beautiful, ice formation and beautiful things to observe now in the next couple of hours.
Well, Steffi, maybe you can tell us sort of how you told me how this very, very cold water becomes sea ice, and Joe's got some pictures to help illustrate.
Cool, yeah. So what is actually happening? So we have the ocean, and the ocean is of course not only like fresh water as it is like what's getting out of the tap or what we have in lakes, but ocean water means that you have salt in the water. That means the ocean here is freezing at like minus 1.8 degrees. And when it's freezing, you have actually two different paths, so to say, how sea ice can form. The one is now showing in the images here is when you have more, I think this, this is like more the calm state, meaning you have like it looks a little bit oily, as you can see on that image, but it's not oil. This is like really the beginning stage of how sea ice forms. So it's like when the temperature of the water drops below -1.8, this thin layer of ice is starting to form. And the more and the longer it's cold and kind of really cold conditions, then like gray ice patches develop. So maybe I think this is on the next picture. Maybe. Oh no, we go now first. Okay, so we just go into the rough. So we have actually, so as I said, so we have two different ways how sea ice can form. It's either a calm way or more rough way. And what you can see here is the more rough way now. So that means you have this like liquid, you have this oily film on top of the ocean as you've seen before. And when you have now like winds going through it, that means that this cannot really like form as a solid sheet of ice, but the waves cause that this thin ice is like breaking and crushing, and then it's just like rubbering to each other. And this causes then forming this so-called pancakes. This is of course not related what you have for breakfast in the morning on your table, but this is like really called pancakes because you can see it's really like it's big as a plate in the beginning, and it's just like growing and growing and growing. And this is what you can see that in the next image. And those pancakes are getting bigger and bigger and then form in the end a solid sheet of ice. And this is basically the one way how sea ice can form. And the other way is that I was just like referring before to is the more calm way, meaning you have not that much wind and this sheet of ice can really just like grow and grow and grow just because of the cold temperatures. And there you have then the thin ice in the beginning, so this grayish stuff as you've seen before. And this ice is then, I think maybe on the next image, yes, this is now what you can see here. This gray stuff is then also thickening, but in the beginning, when you have like maybe 5 centimeters, it's still kind of, it can break easily. And when you have then waves coming into, not that strong waves that cause the formation of that of these pancakes, but what you can see here is what is happening. So this grayish ice is like breaking up, and then just like it's drifting into each other, as you can see here really nicely on the image. And then this is what you can see is called finger rafting. So because these thin ice sheets are kind of really drifting into each other and form like these fingers, and we've seen those many in the last couple of hours. And then the next stage is actually that it's then getting like gray, whitish ice, and so the ice is getting thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. And with that, it also changes its color. And maybe we can see that on the next image. Yes, and then at the end of the day, so you have like grow and grow and grow, and then you have at some point really like a solid ice sheet, as you can see it here now in the image. So it's all white cover. This is what we have seen now the last couple of weeks. So it's white, but it's not that level now anymore as you might have thought, that it's like you have the ocean, then you have just like a flat white thing on top, but it's like really, it has a lot of ridges. Ridges means the ice is still in motion. Sea ice is nothing that is really stable, but it's like moving, it's driven by the wind. And this causes that it's like breaking up, as you can see in the image with those like so-called leads. And then on the other hand, where it's also, whenever sea ice is breaking up, it might also in the end again ridge into each other. So it just like comes back, and it does not come back just like as a puzzle game, but it then really crashes into each other and forms those really nice ice ridges, which give then the sea ice kind of a topography on top of it. And this is basically how sea ice forms and what can happen with it within like the seasonal cycle. So it's like it's really dynamic. It's happening a lot. And this is also what we experienced the last week. So we were drifting with the ice because the ice is always in motion, driven by the atmospheric circulation pattern, meaning basically wind, or by the oceanic circulation pattern, meaning like really also caused by winds in the end and tides and so on.
Was there another picture or no?
I think that's it.
The last one?
Maybe.
All right, fantastic. Well, I think it's really important to know that when we stop anywhere, during this expedition, when we stopped and there was a prospect of getting out on ice, she was the first one lined up. She was ready to go with all of her equipment. And we have some pictures queued up as well, I think, of Steffi's workspace in the 3rd floor lab on the SAA Gaulis. We were hoping to live stream from there today, but the ship is underway and that's so close to the engine that room just kind of vibrates and is really loud. so you wouldn't have been able to hear us. But can you tell us what we're looking at, Steffi?
This is my chaotic lab, actually. So you can see in the foreground those boxes. This is actually where all our equipment is in that we brought also onto the ice. So when I was working on the ice, I was basically interested to see how thick is the ice, and how thick is the snow, and how do the properties of the sea ice and the snow look like. And therefore, we had on the one hand sledges where we had an instrument on it which is able to measure sea ice thickness. You can see those here in the back now. And then we drilled a lot of ice cores. So in total, I worked out now with 24 ice cores. And those 24 ice cores gave me 630 ice samples. Because what we did is, so we drilled those ice cores. So it's really like, it's like a core. With a diameter of 9 centimeters. And then we sliced those ice cores on sides. So because I want to see really what is the sea ice about. So as I just told you before, how the sea ice can form, this is actually what I can then also see in the ice cores. And therefore, when you take it, you can see already on the ice core like different colors, kind of. So you have like the white part on top. This is kind of obvious. This is the snow. Then also later in the core, there can happen again that you have like whitish-looking areas, because this is then also ice that was formed from snow, for example. Then you can have like super crystal clear ice, which is really we leaked on actually, just to prove kind of that this is also ice that was formed from snow just because the snow melted and refroze again. And then you have the ice that is really just, quotation marks, just formed from the ocean. And this is then what we sliced on site, and then I melted that, and then I was sitting at exactly the sink you can see here now for hours and hours and hours, and doing all my analysis. So meaning I measure here on board the salinity, and then I fill it all in small vials, and those vials will be sent then back home to Germany, where we do further analysis to learn even more about the history of the ice.
Can you define what salinity is?
Salinity is like, so how much salt is in the water. So it's in the ice, because the ocean here has a salinity of around 34 to 35 parts per million. And the ice in the end has an average salinity, so salt content of around 3 to 5 parts per million. And this is actually the same concentration as your spaghetti water has. So this is what we're always joking about, because we had a water shortage here on board, and I was just like, hey, I could just bring some ice cores to the kitchen and ask them to just boil our noodles for lunch or dinner in there. So yeah, this is exactly what you need.
So I'm really curious, because becoming an sea ice scientist is kind of a specialty thing. How did you first get interested in this field?
So in school, I must admit, my favorite subjects have been math and physics, and that's maybe not like too typical. But I didn't want to study like pure physics. That seemed to be a little bit too nerdy for me. And then I came up to study meteorology, so like weather and climate. And then I was thinking, okay, where could I study that? And I'm originally from Berlin in Germany, and I could have studied it there, but I didn't want to. So I had I looked around for different universities, and I was then also in Hamburg. And in Hamburg, there was a really shitty poster, just like at the far end of the hall, with the title Polar Meteorology. And this was actually the first time I kind of got touched with that topic. And then, and this is now really not joking, then the first book I was reading about polar regions was the one of the Endurance Expedition with Shackleton. And this is how it all started. And then I just read more and more and more and got super excited about it. And yeah, and then I studied in the end meteorology in Berlin, I must admit. But I then had the possibility already during my bachelor studies to go the first time to Antarctica with our German icebreaker. And this is when I was finally infected. I was like, okay, this is what I want to continue. And then I went for my master's to Hamburg. I studied actually also for a master course in Svalbard, in Spitsbergen, at the northernmost university, Arctic geophysics. And then I went for my PhD to the Rafting Institute in Germany. And this is just how it continued. And it's just like, I kind of developed that passion, and also that passion with the snow. It all developed over time. And I'm really, really grateful for that.
Well, you have very successfully inspired everyone on board the ship to appreciate ice. Maybe not at the level you do, but we all at least have a broader appreciation for all the ice around us, which I'm very grateful for.
Me too.
What you have been, maybe of many of the people on board the ship, you've been to the polar regions more than others. Tell us about some of your other expeditions to the Arctic or the Antarctic.
Yeah, so this expedition was actually my 9th expedition to the Antarctic, and in general, I think my 14th expedition to polar regions. So as I said, my first expedition was in 2010. And since then, I was kind of regularly down here in the Antarctic, but also in the Arctic. And just as an example, so you might have heard about the Mosaic expedition, this big drifting experiment in the Arctic where we froze in our German icebreaker for 1 year to study like the Arctic climate system at a whole for 1 year. And I took part in that one in the 3rd leg, so they have been like different parts of it. So I spent there 5 months in total. And then we have our German overwintering station here in Antarctica, at the eastern tip of the Weddell Sea. And I'm also coordinating there the sea ice program. And I'm also regularly there. And I think I know already now that I will go there in November this year again. So I will be soon back in Antarctica. And I'm already now looking forward to that, especially as we are now just like leaving the ice.
Yeah. Oh, you're already thinking about your next trip.
Sure.
It doesn't surprise me at all. So, Joe, we could talk to Dr. Steffi for a long time, but I know there are probably some kids who have some questions for her. So I'll turn it over to questions.
All right. Well, Steffi, it's so great to have you joining us live today. If you have to jump up and look at some really cool ice, that's okay. We'll understand if you have to run back and forth and look for really cool things out on the water. All right. Well, let's get some questions going from some of our classrooms. If you're tuning in live via YouTube, feel free to pop some questions into the chat there. And then I do want to make a shout out because one of our classrooms, I don't think their microphone's connected. They're joining us in Ontario here in Canada, some grade 6-7s with Miss Rainey. So if you use the chat, the private chat, and send some questions, type them in there. I will make sure we get a chance to ask those questions. But our first question is going to come from Allen, Texas. And they're saying they've heard that icebergs, the ice that makes up icebergs, is much harder than sea ice. Is this true?
Yes, it is true, because icebergs are mainly, or not mainly, so icebergs are formed from the glacier ice, so meaning from the land ice masses, and land ice masses are formed in the end from compressed and also like melted and refrozen snow. And this is in the end all just like super fresh water, like with no salinity. So this is like when this is getting cold and like frozen, this is like super hard stuff. And the sea ice, as I mentioned, so this has the salinity of between 3 and 5 parts per million. And that causes that the sea ice is really kind of soft. And it's easy like to cut it, or like also for the ship, it's much easier to go through sea ice than through lake ice, for example.
All right, awesome. We've got another question here. This question is coming from Brazil, and they are wondering, the ice studies that are happening, are they useful in predicting the drift of the ice? How is studying the ice supporting the search for endurance?
Yes, so I mean, one of the major points here for the endurance was that, so we had that search box and we had like the position where the endurance was thrown the last time, but this box is like always covered with sea ice. And the point was then that they, when they want to look for, or when we were looking for the wreck site, we needed to really anchor to a floe, and then we basically drifted with a whole ice pack. And therefore, also this was part of the science team here on board, that we supported that search basically by like giving the people who were operating the AUV, giving them forecasts how would the sea ice drift over the next like couple of hours or even days, to see where should we position the ship to then get in exactly the position where they want to have the ship in the end. And so this was really like a close collaboration between the AOV team, between the ship and between the science team.
Okay. We have Mrs. Schaefer's class. They're 5th graders joining us from New Jersey. Let me see if they're queued up here and ready. Miss Schaefer's crew, are you there? Okay, it looks like they might not be ready to ask their questions, so I'm going to tuck them backstage for now, and I'll keep an eye out for their camera to turn back on. Let's grab another question here about sea life. So we have a question here wondering, what kind of life? Do you see any life under the sea ice, like algae or krill, maybe little fish? What kind of life do you see under the sea ice?
Well, I mean, so here we I did not have the possibility to really watch close beneath the sea ice. But what you can see when we went through the ice and when the ice floes are turning, you see always those brownish layers, either at the bottom of the ice or in like the middle part of the ice. And this is basically nothing else than algae or biomass in general. And sometimes you could, like when we drilled big holes in the ice, you could sometimes like see a krill maybe. So this is like really typical. So this is what is life under the sea ice about. So it's basically really algae and a lot of krill, which is like the main diet of like the penguin, the whales, and all the other bigger animals around us.
All right. Well, during one of our earlier events, we had Tim share a video with us where he was out on the sea ice, maybe even with yourself, and he was pulling one of those sledges that was being used to detect the thickness of the ice. Can you tell us a little bit more about those sledges and how they're able to do that, to determine the thickness of that sea ice?
Yeah, so to keep it simple, you could say that those sledges, so in that sledge, there's a measurement device, and this is actually the one measuring kind of the sea ice thickness. So what is happening is that it's working like a metal detector, so to say. So it's basically looking for the next conductive medium. And when you assume, even though sea ice has a salinity of 3 to 5 parts per million, as I said, so this is still comparably fresh to the ocean beneath it, as I said, as this has 34 to 35 parts per million. So therefore, the next conductive layer, when we have that sledge on top of the ice, the next conductive layer is just the ocean beneath the ice. And to be more precise, it would be like exactly the underside of the ice, because this is exactly where the ice touches the ocean, right? So therefore, when you pull now the sledge on top of the sea ice, and it gets in the end, then with that measurement method, you get the underside of the ice, because this is the next conductive layer. You get in the end the total sea ice thickness. So this is actually what this sledge is about.
Okay, so we have another question here, and this question is wondering, how much time in total were you able to spend off the ship and on the sea ice?
So we spent on average 2 to 3 hours per ice station. So let's keep it simple and say 2. And we managed in the end to fulfill 17 ice stations. So this would make like 34 hours plus additional. So I would say like maybe 40 hours in total I spent on the ice.
All right. Wow, that's amazing. Almost 2 full days out on the sea ice. That's pretty cool. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of getting from the ship and then out onto the sea ice? Was it as easy as opening a door and going down like a little set of stairs or a rope ladder? How were you getting to and from the sea ice?
So there were actually 2 possibilities, and the one we used the most was like a kind of a basket. So it's like how would you call it? A basket hanging basically on the crane, and then we just put all our equipment into that basket, and we attached ourselves to the basket. It sounds a little bit weird, but this is exactly what we did actually. And then the crane would just put us like from the ship right on the floe next to the ship. So this is how we managed it for like 15 out of the 17 ice stations. And then we had 2 other ice stations which were serviced by helicopter. So therefore, we just put all our equipment into the helicopter, and then we just gave coordinates to the pilots of the helicopter, and then they flew us to those coordinates, and this is then where we get dropped basically. So really, they just dropped us and all our equipment and left again, and then we were sitting there alone with us and our equipment to do our science there.
I want to add to that one of the first things that we did when we arrived in the Weddell Sea was Steffi and her team got in a helicopter and flew way ahead of the ship to sort of the bottom of the search area and left a buoy, a tracking buoy that they named Miss Chippy after the cat that was aboard the Endurance. And the whole time we've been here, we've been tracking very closely the movement of Miss Chippy to give us an idea of what's happening with the ice drift, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And very soon on the Reach the World site and through our newsletter, we will be sharing a link that Steffi shared with me where you can continue to track Miss Chippy if you want. It does wild things. It doesn't just go from point A to point B. It does loops. It goes left. It goes right. It speeds up. It slows down. It really gives you a good sense of how dynamic the sea ice is. It's not sitting still.
Yeah, exactly. And you can also, like, when you get that link, you can also see there what is actually the temperature, so how cold might Miss Chippy feel, and you can also get the snow depth, because this is what the buoy is all about, to get an idea of about snow accumulation while it's like drifting through the ice. And then all these information I send hourly back home, and this is what you can see then on the website.
Okay, very cool. Well, we've got a question here from our grade 6-7s. They are joining us in Ontario, Canada, and they're curious about the average thickness of the sea ice. What was the average thickness you were finding?
Yeah, so it was basically something between 1 meter and 1.80 meters. So this, I mean, as I said, so we worked in the end on now 17 ice floes. But of course, one must admit that those ice floes that we were working on had been like not the thickest ice floes here in the region, because those were just like all the floes where the ship attached to, and those ice floes had an average thickness of 1 meter to 1.80 meters. So this is what we were working on.
All right. So you mentioned the ice being kind of between 1 meter to 2 meters thick, and that ice, that level of ice is no problem for the Agulhas too. It has no problem moving through ice of that thickness.
No, it's not, and especially because in addition, the ice is really soft here, because as I mentioned, on the one hand, it's the salt in it, and on the other hand, it's also like, as we are at the end of the summer, the ice is really warm, and so it means it's really rotten, and therefore it's super easy for the ship to go through.
All right. So I see Mrs. Schaefer's grade 5 crew in New Jersey have turned on their camera. Just give me a wave if you're ready with a question. Oh, I see some waving, so let's bring them in here. Hey, New Jersey, how we doing? All right, I see some hands. I think someone's coming up. Yep.
Have you ever saw like extreme ice that you don't think you can solve the mystery to?
Have you seen anything unusual?
Unusual? No, I mean, we met a lot of penguins. They've been again also this year super curious, but this was not unexpected. I mean, we are living here now in their living room basically, or we were working in their living room. So I would say no. It was all expected.
Any things that were different here than anywhere else?
It's just like typical. Sorry.
Thank you.
All right. Fairly typical ice. Fair enough. Well, Miss Schaefer's crew, if you get another question ready. Oh, I see hands already. So maybe we'll stick with you for another minute. We'll grab another one of those questions.
Good. Go ahead.
How many years do you have to go to school to do your job?
So in Germany, we have to go to school for 13 years. And then after those 13 years, I went to university for another 5 years. And then I did my PhD for another 3 years. So it was like quite a long period, but I think definitely seeing now what I'm seeing just right now at that moment, I think it was worth it to spend all that time.
Thank you.
All right, very cool. Miss Schaefer, I know there's more questions. We'll probably come back your way in a couple minutes and snag another couple questions. So we do have some curiosity about the samples you took. Steffi, what is the fate of those samples? So obviously you're going to end up back in Cape Town at some stage. what is the fate of those samples? Where will they go and how will they get there?
The samples will go to Germany, to Potsdam. So there's so we have the Alfred Wegener Institute is mainly based in Bremerhaven in Germany, but we have also another base of the institute in Potsdam, and this is where the analysis will be done, and this is where they will be shipped, and they need to be stored at 4 degrees Celsius, and this is just like how they will be transported. It's just in those days now we decide whether they will go by plane or by ship. But yeah, this is where and how they will end up.
Okay, well, here's, I like this question. This is a good one. So it sounds like you're making your way out of the sea ice. So it's more towards open water. The ice is going to become further apart. Does this mean you're getting to a part of the expedition where you can kind of relax a little bit? Or do you have a lot more to do, kind of prep and make sure everything's ready to go?
There's never the part that you relax on the ship. So what I just, before I came here, what we just did is that we start packing. So we brought all our equipment here. We just, like, as you have seen on the images in the beginning, we just spread it now all over the labs, and we just have to pack it back. And we have to label everything that it's all can be sent back home. And then it's, of course, everything about the analysis of the data, because I have most of the data I have just when I leave that ship. So yes, I have still the samples that I will send to Germany, but I have quite some data that I can already look into, and which I will start also to compare already to previous expeditions and so on, so that hopefully when we will be in Cape Town, that I can come up with first like preliminary results by that point. So this is basically what it's all about. And I mean, yes, it's still quite, 10, 11, 12 days, but this is really what it takes in the end to look through all these data, especially because we have much more data and ice stations than I ever expected before.
All right. So this is a personal question from myself. An event that we did earlier, we had Tim and Dan Snow with us, and they tried pemmican, which was kind of a staple on the Endurance expedition out on the ice. I'm wondering if when the pemmican was out, did you get a chance to try it?
Did you try the pemmican? It's like beef and beef fat and cranberries. I don't think you did.
No.
Sounds like a no. Looks like a no. All right.
Like
there's some left over there. I'll give you some.
Okay. Shouldn't be
all right.
afraid.
If you do end up trying it, let us know how it was. Let's check back in with our crew in New Jersey, see if they have another question or two for us. Also, shout out to, I know we're streaming on YouTube and Facebook right now. We've got a few minutes left. So if you have any last minute questions, get those in now before the time is up. But go ahead, Ms. Schaefer's crew.
Hi, what's your favorite thing about your job?
What's
favorite thing?
My favorite thing. Well, I think if I just look out of the window, I think this pretty much explains it. So I think that my favorite point about the job is really the possibility to go on expeditions as those, because really for the last years I've been more or less once per year for 2 to 3 months out in the field, like either in the Arctic or in the Antarctic. And I think this is really what makes my job as exciting as it is. And when I'm not in the field, I'm like back in the office, but also there I'm not that often, because then I spend also a lot of time on international conferences. I meet with a lot of colleagues all over the world, and this is really like, I think I don't have like in every week routine, so to say. So it's really like every week, every day is super different, and this is what I really like about my job.
Thank you.
All right, I can see a few more hands. You want to pop up another student or two, Mrs. Schaefer?
Hey.
Hi, how many icebergs have you seen so far?
Icebergs, oh gosh, we haven't counted them. So I can tell you we've been, I think, on 2 ice floes, which had like incorporated icebergs in the middle of the floe, so we could walk to the icebergs, of course, still in a safe distance, and to see them from close. But in general, you see a lot of icebergs, and I think I even saw now some like at the horizon. So it's like it's a lot of icebergs up here because you have like in the Weddell Sea, you have the Weddell Gyre, and all the ice, so like the sea ice and the icebergs are all transported out the Weddell Gyre just in that area where we are now, and this is why we have really a lot of icebergs here in that area.
Thank you.
All right, let's squeeze one more in before we say goodbye to our crew from New Jersey. Lots of good questions.
Hi. How thick has the ice been?
Oh, we had that question before, didn't we? So yeah, it was something between 1 meter and 1.80 meters on average over all ice stations.
Thank you.
All right,
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Let's
The
get a big wave.
kids weren't able to see Tim. Can he just stick his head in just so they could see Tim?
Hi.
There you go. You're famous, Tim. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Schaefer's crew, thanks so much for joining us today. It was great to see your class.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very cool. All right, let's tuck behind the scenes there. So Tim, what are you up to? What are the next few days going to look like for you?
Ooh, we've got some great additional live stream events this week. Joe, tomorrow we're going to be talking with Director of Exploration Benson Bound and AUV Supervisor Chad Bonin. On Thursday, we are going to be talking with expedition photographer Esther Horvath, who has been documenting this expedition, and I know has taken a lot of inspiration from the photographer who was aboard the Endurance Expedition. It's just a great parallel between the historical pictures and the pictures we've been able to create from this expedition. And then on Friday, I believe we're speaking with the bosun of the SA Agulhas 2, which is a job that I didn't know existed until I came onto the ship, and it turns out it's a very important job. So I'm excited to speak with him and to share with you all what a bosun on an ocean-going vessel does.
All right, very cool. Well, classrooms who are tuning in, make sure you visit the site I've shared down at the bottom if you haven't already, though I'm sure you have. reachtheworld.org/endurance22. You can find all kinds of great content there, from albums, field notes, journals, logbooks, meet different members of the crew, really cool articles here as well. So do spend some time diving a little bit deeper behind the expedition with Reach the World here on this page. A shout out to those joining us on Facebook today. A shout out to those on YouTube, as well as our camera classrooms today. It was great to see you. Steffi, it was so great to meet you. I hope you get some great ice sightings before the end of the day. And Tim, we look forward to our next connection. Maybe bring Celie along. We miss Celie today.
Wait, you know what? Before we go, there's Celie. You can see, I think Celie was just a little bit off camera, but Celie's been here the whole time. We wouldn't bring you aboard the ship without having Celie too.
All right, that's awesome. Good stuff. Well, Tim, we look forward to our next connection. Again, Steffi, it was so great to see you. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and I'm glad you got to spend so much time on the sea ice.
Thanks,
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
All right, signing off for today. Thanks, everyone.